that right?
Okay.
So last time we met, a couple of weeks ago, it was more than that actually, and we did the 8th chapter, and the 8th chapter is talking about attaining the supreme, and it described different processes: Sat Chakra Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and it culminated in Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga, we're just relying on Krishna, and the other processes, they're relying on their own endeavor to a great degree. So it's a very precarious path, because it started the chapter by saying we only have to remember Krishna at the time of death. Whatever one remembers when he leaves that world, this world, that's the state he'll attain. And so, just like this chapter saying the process, the last chapter said the process is bhakti, because bhakti we rely on Krishna. And it said that if we practice bhakti, we'll fulfill our desires, material, spiritual, and at the end we'll get Krishna. So we don't lose anything. And so this chapter, it's going to explain about the nature of a bhakta who can obtain Krishna, what we need to be, and the process of being that person. So you're all experienced devotees. A lot of it we will have a lot will be what we've experienced personally, and some maybe not. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning of the chapter 9, and it starts by, well, I'll just go through the chapter. We may not finish this chapter completely, because it's good to spend some time on this 9th chapter, because this chapter is called confidential knowledge, or it's talking about pure devotional service. That's confidential knowledge, or most confidential knowledge. So confidential knowledge is talked about in the well, we'll do that later actually. It's progressive. We've been talking about Guyam. Guyam means secret, so, or confidential. And so this first verse uses this word. Raja Vijay Raja Guyam Pabisram Idam Utman. Oh, sorry, that's the second one. We'll just do the first one. And but before we do that, we'll just run over the chapter. I'm just trying to do that. Yeah, you can get it. I'm not last night.
Can I take this?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, chapter 1, it glorifies the knowledge we're going to hear. And and then this then up to, that's from 1 to 3, to takes 4 to 10. We talk about Krishna's relationship with this world, Aishvarya, or his power and opulence. But this is not fully understanding Krishna. It's understanding how he interacts with the world and remains separate. And then we go on to chapter, or takes, 11 to 25. And then it talks about the different types of worship. And this culminates in bhakti. But then after we've discussed that, it starts going back to, the type of people who will approach transcendental knowledge. We mentioned in the 7th chapter, Namam Duskrutina Muda, Naradamam Prabhadyate. A Duskrutina is a person who has merit, but it's misplaced. So we get intelligent people in this world, but they're materialistic. So they call their kriti, or their merit is destroyed, duskriti. And namam duskriti in a mudha. First one is a mudha. Anyway, maybe we should get to that point before we start talking about it. We're just going over it now. Okay, so take 16 and 19. Talks about, well, that 15 talks about three kinds of people other than those four who approach Krishna. There's three kinds of people who are lower. And so we'll hear about that. And then it starts talking about, okay, now we've gone through all the preliminaries. Let's start talking about bhakti and what it entails. Right? From 26 to 24. Sorry, to 34. And then from at the end, it concludes that, you know, therefore, it's a famous verse which is repeated in the 18th chapter. Does anybody know what that is? It's 1865. I can't remember the Sanskrit myself. I forgot. Just a minute. Okay, anyway. Manmana bhava madbhakto. Mam yajni mam namaskru. Mame vaishati. Yuktena atmanam atmanam. And then it's just slightly different at the end in the 18th chapter. Talking about, you know, what the symptoms of a fully surrendered soul are. Okay. Okay, so let's go on. So Guya. Let's start with the first one. Somebody want to recite the Sanskrit for the first verse and then the translation of the 9th chapter. You can all ever go reciting the Sanskrit if you want. We can go through reciting the Sanskrit. You know, it'll you know, we'll get it wrong to some degree, and we always do. But at least by practice, we get better, you know.
Shall I do the first one, Maharaj?
Okay.
Sri Bhagavan Vacha Idam Tute Goya Tamam Pravakshay Shamiyanash Shave Yanam Vijnana Saitam Yajatram Yashe Shabbat.
Translation.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence."
Yeah. So, you know, envy and asuyave. It's this envy which is protecting us, or protecting Krishna. It's keeping us away from Krishna, because we don't want to associate with somebody who's envious, do we? Somebody who's just going to actually, you know, criticize and wind us up.
Yeah.
So Krishna, he doesn't explain it to those people, because what will happen if he does, do you think? You know, let's say if you were a Sheffield Wednesday supporter, right? And somebody starts glorifying Sheffield United. How do you feel?
It's not going to be happy.
You're going to screw it, you know. So I wind people up in Manchester when I'm doing books. I'll see them walking down, they've got a, you know, a Manchester City badge on, and I'll say, "You look like a Manchester United supporter." This woman, she nearly, she said nearly behind me. And I get out doing it that day. So anyway, so it's like that, you know, if we say anything to somebody about somebody we don't like, and you know, they're going to become like really wound up. So Krishna doesn't allow himself to be spoken in that way. He only speaks to those who want to hear, in other words. So Arjuna is not envious and he's a devotee. Okay, carry on.
You want me to do text to Maharaj? Or?
Okay, you can be the gaffer today.
No, I mean, I don't know if we're taking it in turns or somebody else wants to do it. It doesn't bother me, you know.
Oh, you're right.
Somebody else wants to do it, it's no problem. Honestly, believe me, it don't matter.
Yeah, you can be in charge today, Anthony. Go on, second one. What's the second one?
Rajavidya Raja Guhan Pavitramidam Uttamam Pradyak
Yeah, we go on.
Pradyak Shavak Yamam Damyam Susukam Katum Avyayam. Oh, right. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting and it is joyfully performed.
Okay. So, did we go through? Did we go through the chapter? We didn't, did we?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so 2 to 6. Knowledge of matter and spirit. 7 to 8. Oh no, we're doing. Yeah, chapters 2 to 6. This is how it, you know, this knowledge is more confidential, most confidential. Chapters 2 to 6 of Bhagavadgita, that's the first 6 chapters. It's called Guya. So it's confidential knowledge. Knowledge about the soul. Not many people know that they're not the body, you know. In fact, 99%. So we can see it's a secret. And then the next chapter, chapters 7 to 8, which we did last two weeks. This is knowledge of bhakti. That, you know, we don't just understand with the soul, but we understand related to the Supreme Soul. So this is actually more confidential. Not many, a lot less people know about that. And then finally, we've come to 9. So this is most confidential knowledge, that we don't just understand the Supreme, but we actually directly engage in his devotional service. So more confidential is called Guyatara. So there's Guya, Guyatara, and the last one is called Guyatama. That's the most confidential. Okay. This is not knowledge beyond Aishvarya. Aishvarya means we know the, well, it's describing the Aishvarya symptoms, this most confidential knowledge, how Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. So we'll read that in this section. And then it'll finish it off by talking about how to actually engage in devotional service to that person. Yeah, and then chapters 9 to 10. These are the center of the Gita. So as we said last week, you know, when you have a sandwich, you don't call it a bread sandwich, do you? You call it by what's inside. So bhakti is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. It's sandwiched in between the first 6 chapters, which is called, what's it called? First 6, does anybody remember? Go on, have a bash. Karma Yoga. How to work with detachment and ultimately working with devotion and become naturally detached. And so the middle 6 are bhakti. And what's the last 6 then? It's called jnana yoga, philosophical understanding of the process. Yeah. So this chapter 9 and 10 are in the middle, and they're the most confidential knowledge. Chapter 10 they'll start talking about the opulence of the absolute. So, you know, before you can become determined to follow a particular path, you've got to know about what you're trying to obtain. Is that right? If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. You know what I mean? You remember Alice in Wonderland? Did I use it? Alice in Wonderland. You know, she fell, did I? She fell down the rabbit hole, didn't she? But she actually fell asleep. And when she got to the bottom, she came to a road. And she started walking down this road and came to a junction. So it went 3 ways. And on the signpost was this owl. And so she thought, yeah, I'll ask the wise owl. I said, which way do I go? He says, where do you want to go? She said, I don't know. I said, well, it don't matter which way you go then. So that's the same thing, you know. We have to know where we're going, otherwise we won't be very enthusiastic. Then so chapter 7 and 9, they're actually many similar concepts as there, but a little bit more detail in chapter 9. In chapter 7, you know, verses 1 to 2 and verses 9, 1 to 2, are speaking about the same thing. It's just like in the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavadgita, we talked about karma yoga, didn't we? How to work with attachment. And then 2 chapters later, in chapter 5, he talked about karma yoga. And then he said he gave a subhead in, you know, action in Krishna consciousness. So, in other words, he was talking in more detail about karma yoga. So this is in the same way. The 9th chapter is talking in more detail about what we've already heard in the 7th chapter. So we were talking actually about the indirectly, or to some degree, about devotional service in the 7th chapter, which talks about knowledge of the absolute. We got some knowledge, but now we have the most confidential knowledge. Then chapter 7, 4 to 7, and verse 12 as well, is the same as from verse 4 in this to verse 10. And this is talking about, you know, how, okay, now we've, you know, learned a little bit about the Supreme. So, you know, what does he do? That's the next thing we ask, isn't it, when we're talking to people? What do you do? So it talks about how he's related to the world that we're in. So then, you know, we can actually identify with that. Yeah. We can't identify with the spiritual. We don't really know it. But we, you know, okay, there's Krishna and it's related to the material world. Why, you know? So we start to understand a little bit about our own position. And then in chapter 7, it talks about in verses 8 to 11, is the same as in the 9th chapter, which is 16 to 19. And then it talks about, you know, it's connected, but how he actually is all pervasive within this world. How he permeates this world. That's super soul, isn't it? The super soul's in every individual atom, even. And then 7:20 to 23 is the same as 9:20 to 28. And it talks about demigod worship. Some people, you know, they worship in the demigods instead of Krishna. And so it's talking about, and then it'll talk about in 9 to 11 in the, 11 to 15 in the 9th chapter, it'll compare impersonalists to devotees' understanding of Krishna. Okay. Because Krishna is described by the process of karma yoga in chapter 3, but then later it's elaborated on in chapter 5. So I just thought it just gives a little bit of structure, you know, if we note these things down, then, you know, it gives a little bit of structure to the Bhagavad Gita, because it seems if we just keep reading it, it's actually not structured. That, you know, we're reading the same thing again, and it becomes a little bit confusing. But you know, Krishna's dialogue, it's perfect. He's actually logically going through everything to answer Arjuna's question. And that Prabhupada's always elaborating it on the purports. And Prabhupada's always making sure he talks about Bhakti Yoga, so we get thrown from what the thread of the actual translations are sometimes. So this overview is helping us to understand Krishna's thread of speaking and how he's, you know, gradually putting everything together to come to the point of, you know, devotional service. So yeah, so now we start 1 to 3 is glorifying the process of devotional service. And first thing is we have to be non-envious. Envy will stop us from approaching the Lord. Then the second verse, which we just read, it's Guyatamam. Idam te tu Guyatamam. It's most confident. Did you read the translation, Anthony?
Yeah, I did. Of text 2.
Okay.
Want me to do it again?
It talks about jnanam, knowledge, and realized knowledge. Then it talks about vijnanam, astikam. What's astikam?
I hope he's just gone.
I think we lost him. Yeah, he'll just might be his connection
Yeah, I'll come back in a minute.
or his battery.
Yeah, could be.
I'm just thinking, Jai Krishna, when Maharaj was saying that when Alice in Wonderland goes down a rabbit hole, she's in a dream. I was reading somewhere that we're in a dream. Where did
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're reading that.
Kind of right, isn't it?
Dream or something.
Yeah, I suppose that's kind of the thingy of illusory energy Maya on us, isn't it? We're in like a dream state.
Yeah. Or did I read Brahma's dream or
He's back.
somebody's dream? If I forget where I read it.
Yeah, I realize what you're talking about. There's that pastime, isn't there, Anthony?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back. Okay, Raja Vidya. Raja means king. Vidya means knowledge. So this knowledge is a king of all education. And as we said before, Raja Guyam is the king of all confidential knowledge. Pavitram Idam, the most purest knowledge. What else is there? Uttamam, it's transcendental. Pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means direct perception. So you know, when we practice devotional service, after some time we become convinced because we experience the effects, don't we? We experience a higher quality of life, we experience happiness. And so we become, you know, what we call, we're actually realized. We directly experience the results. Dharmyam, it's the highest religion. ice process. What does Susukam mean? Susukam
Full of happiness or blissful.
It means it's joyful.
Yeah.
Sukha means happiness, doesn't it? Blissful. Avyayam means it's eternal. It just carries on eternally. Okay. So now we come to the third verse. We read that. Well, we've changed readers because there's about 9 devotees here. So maybe Jai Krishna can read.
Okay. Ashradadana Purusha Damasyasya Parantapa Aprapya Mam Nivatante Mrityu Samsara Vatmani. Those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world.
Yeah, so this is talking about the first verse. Those who are envious, they can't actually follow this process. So the result is they have to take birth again. Okay.
To carry on.
Yeah.
Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta mutina mat stani sarvabhutani nachaham tesh vashtitaha.
Yeah, so we just heard about those who can't attain Krishna due to a lack of faith. Real faith actually means we're just convinced that I just have to follow this process and nothing else. Nothing else will actually, any other process is subservient to this. And all my material needs will be actually catered for. Krishna promises that. So this next verse.
I'll read the English, Maharaj.
Oh, didn't you read it? Okay.
By me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them.
So this is Krishna's mystic opulence. And the next verse also speaks about it. It's saying that that he's not a part of the material world, but he is in one respect in that, he's pervading everything. So this is his antaryami, it's his super soul manifestation, which is not actually his personality, but it's an expansion of him. Yeah, it comes through the 3 Vishnus, the creators and maintainers of this world. And the last Vishnu is Kshirodakashaya Vishnu, who is the one who is in every atom. So he's pervading the whole creation by Karanadakashaya Vishnu, the universe by Garbhadakashaya Vishnu, and the different atoms by Kshirodakashaya Vishnu. Okay. So this is his Aishwarya or mystic opulence. Is actually how is but then the next verse, read the next verse.
Nachamat stani bhutani pasyame yogam aishvaram bhuta branacha bhuta sto mamatma bhuta bhavanaha. I'll just do the English. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation. For myself is the very source of creation.
Yeah, so Krishna's a person, just like a managing director or an owner of a big firm is a person. And although his energy is spread throughout his, his plant or his particular business, it's nothing really to do with him in one respect. He's got a life separate. So it's saying that is, the whole thing is going on by virtue of his extended energies. We just mentioned 3, which are the Vishnus, the 3 Vishnus. Sounds like a stage act, doesn't it? And then through the demigods and the different representatives on different planets. And so this gives a little bit more information. When people ask us questions, you know, if we understand this concept, we can nicely explain to them God's position. So mystic power, what does mystic mean? It means that we can't understand how it works. It's mystic. It's mystical. When we can understand how it works, it's not mystical. So we'll never understand how Krishna's energies are working. So he's the supreme mystic. Okay. Right, we'll change readers. We can have Andy next. Oh, yeah, go on. We're going along the top of the... I don't know what it's like on your screen. Andy's next on this. You got to put your mic on. Andy, your mouse is moving, but we can't hear you. You've got to switch your mic on.
He's gone into outer space now.
Yuri Gagarin. All right. Andy, you got to switch your mic on. You don't have to do it. Okay, well, wait while you find out. We'll ask Don to read.
Ready? Text 6. Yataksha stito nityam vayu savacha gomaha tata savani bhutani matstatantya purachraya. As the mighty wind blowing everywhere always rests in ethereal space, know that in the same manner all beings rest in me.
Okay, so example of the wind is like, in outer space, there's, everything's all the planets are situated in space, but they're nothing to do with the space. Is that right? So everything's situated in Krishna, but it is not affected by it. It's nothing to do with it in that respect. Or like the wind, it blows on top of a flower and you can smell the flower, but you don't know how it's working. It's carried by the wind. The wind is not, the wind doesn't smell, it's the flower that smells, but it's associated with the wind. But still the wind's different, so Krishna's different. Like that. If anybody's a little bit confused about it, just speak up and we can try and elaborate. Okay, so well, next one done.
Text 7. Sarvabhutani kantaya prakritim yanti mamika kalpakashai punastani kalpata vishtrami aha. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, every material manifestation enters into my nature, and at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I again create.
Number 8, do that one as well.
Prakritim svamavastapya vishwatnyami punapuna bhuta gramami mam krishnam avasham prakriti vasya. The whole cosmic order is under me. By my will, it is manifested again and again, and by my will, it is annihilated at the end.
Well, this is logical, it's somebody who doesn't know these things, it's actually piecing things together very nicely. So this 7 and 8 is called the creation and destruction of the material world by Krishna's energies. We just spoke about those energies, didn't we? They're emanating from him, but they're not really anything to do with him in one respect. They're just his they're just his energies. And so the next verse, and so this talks how he's not the doer in 8, that these energies are working, but he's not becoming bound by working in this world. he's just doing it without becoming bound because he's fulfilling the desires of the living entities. He's detached. It is the key to not being bound. Okay. Okay, number 9. Maybe Sita Takaroni Mataji.
Nachamam tani karmani ni bhatnanti dhananjaya dasina vat asinam asaktam tishuda karmashu. O Dhananjaya, all this work cannot bind me. I am ever detached, seated as though neutral.
Yes, so Udayasina Vat means detached, and Asakta means neutral, and Asaktam means detached. So it's not only neutral, but it's not, it's like, you see, so did I mention this before? How we can be detached. We can be not, there might be an argument going off and they're really, getting into one another's ribs sort of thing and getting angry, and you're stood by, you're thinking, what's the matter with him? They're just like a pair of school kids. Because you're not, you don't listen to what they're saying, you won't become implicated. But as soon as you start listening to them, you start taking sides, then, you start getting disturbed yourself, don't you? That's because you have some attachment for what one of them's saying. But, Krishna's not attached to what people want to do in this world. He's actually completely detached, and he lets the living entity do what he wants, but he fulfills that. So in that way, he's just fulfilling desires. Okay.
10.
Yeah.
Mayat yakshina prakriti sutyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagat vivartate.
So now we're talking about how Krishna is controlling or creating and controlling this world.
This material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again.
Maya Yakshena. Maya means his energy, or it's under his control. Akshena means glance. He glances through Kanadakashaya Vishnu. He maintains through Bhagavadgita Vishnu the universe, and he maintains life within the universe by Shuradakashaya Vishnu. But it's their glance which is giving energy to everything. That's giving the source of all energy, and even the individual soul is getting his energy from that. So, Maya Yakshena Prakriti is glancing at material energy. Okay, Jagat Viparibharte. Jagat means this creation.
Continue.
Okay.
So different. Okay. Avajana timam mudha manushintanu ajritam rambhavam ajanato mama bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature and my supreme dominion over all that be.
Yeah. So most people are in that category. They may even see Krishna. Many people saw Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but they couldn't understand who he was. Some thought he was just a powerful warrior. Some people thought of this, some people thought that. So, if Krishna appeared before us, we wouldn't naturally understand who he was. It's only by his mercy we can understand that.
Yeah.
So it talks about what's the position of those in this verse 11. Avaginanti Manmula. Is that it?
Yeah.
Manasim Tanamash Paramba. So they're not understanding that he looks like a human being, but he's not. You know, that's what Indra thought. Who's this talkative little boy diverting everybody from worshipping me, you know, and they go over down the other. I'll show him a thing or two. And he tried, but he came unstuck, didn't he, you know. He finished up there to go and pay his obeisances to the Surabi cow, you know, he's the king of heaven. And yeah, he's being worshipped by everybody, and he finished up being really humbled. So we should be careful about trying to be, what they call it, trying to be the man. Is it? Trying to be the, what do they call that word? He's the man, they say sometimes, don't they? Have you heard that?
Oh,
So
it's good.
everybody in this world, they want to be the man, right? Even the women want to be the man. Okay, so 12, we'll change readers. And now we've got Andy back.
Moghasha, Mogha Kamano, Moghajana, Vishetasha, Rakashim, Ashurim, Chayava Prakrimonim Shrita. Those who are bewildered are attached by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes of liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are defeated.
Yeah.
Carry
So
on.
three things that, you know, hopes for liberation, that's the jnani. Hopes for fruitive gain, that's the kami. And their culture of knowledge. Well, no, sorry, culture of knowledge is the jnani. And the hopes for liberation is, it's also, you know, like the, similar to the demigod worshippers. Anyway, it'll explain that as we go along. And then 13.
Mahatmanas tu Mampatha Devim Praktrim Ashita Bhajantai Bhajanti Anya Manaso Jnadva Bhutirim Abjatyam. O son of Partha, O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of my divine nature, of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible.
Yeah, so a devotee, by the grace of Krishna, he gets all knowledge. And when he's fixing that knowledge, he can't be shaken. So that's the position of the Mahatma. He's convinced by realization, as we said before. Knowledge alone won't fix us in any situation. We have to have a realization. And that's a Mahatma. Because of his constant engagement in devotional service, Krishna gives him that understanding. So, in other words, everybody can become a Mahatma. It's not just, you know, for a few. And what's the activities of a Mahatma? This is the next one. Can you read that?
Satatam krateyanto nam yatantas cha drida bruta namasyanta cha mam bhaktya yukta upasute, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls, and perpetual worship with me with devotion.
That's a pretty That's a pretty simple thing, isn't it? There's nothing complicated about doing that. Endeavouring with great determination. That's the problem, is that we can't endeavour with great determination without conviction. And we can't be convinced without first knowledge and without, realization. And this is what the nectar of instruction tells us. Utsahan, enthusiasm, nishchayat, dayayat, and then conviction and patience. So, even though, the path may be fraught with difficulties and ups and downs, the thing is, if we have conviction from knowledge and realization, then we can remain, utsan, we can remain enthusiastic and nishchayat karidar. What is it? Utsan nishchayam. I forget now. But we can remain patient anyway, the last one. We can actually learn to tolerate. Yeah. So, and this movement is designed by Lord Chaitanya. All he did is he chanted the holy name, associated with the devotees, spoke a little philosophy, and, just general worship. So that's available to everybody. So now we come to 9:15. So we'll change readers. Who's not read yet? Listening only. Mayapur, Chandradayapur.
Hare Krishna. Jnanaya kena chapyanye yajanto mam upasate ekatvena pritatvena bahudha vishvato mukam. Others who engage in sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as the one without a second, as a diverse in many, and in the universal form.
Okay. You should put this is 15, right?
Yeah, 15.
Yeah. Others who engage in the sacrifice by the cultivation of knowledge, worship of the Supreme as the one without a second, as diverse in many, and in the universal form. So the first one is called Ahangapasanam, Ekatvena, worshipping the Supreme Lord as one without a second. So this is the lowest class. He, is the impersonalist who thinks himself to be God, but he's not purified enough yet to actually fully realize it. So we're going to talk about these three. This is the first one. If we remember, we talked about four classes of persons who approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the 7th chapter. And Duskritina, remember? That we talked about the ones who don't approach, and then the next verse, he talks about the four kinds of people who do actually worship the Supreme Lord. And Chatru Vijantivam Gyanaha Sukatina Arjuna Arto Jignashu Arto Te Gyanicha Bharata Shiva. So, the person who is suffering, Arta Jignasha, wants relief. The person who wants a better quality of life, maybe in England and the Western countries, we can't really identify with that so much. But in poorer countries, sometimes they'll join the temple just to get a square meal and have a few clothes. So they want, some material benefit, usually wealth. And then people who are just genuinely inquisitive, And then finally, the one who is actually in knowledge of the absolute truth. The one who knows what he should do. He has some knowledge. He knows he's not the body. So the first three are actually karma yogis, and the last one is a jnana yogi. And as we hear in the next, have I got the right thing here? Just a minute. Anyway, we're going off the track here. I'll come back to those are the four. We've done that before, and now we're saying there's another three in who will try to approach Krishna. So we're talking about a lower quality of practitioner. Ekat Vena, that means the impersonalist. Angrapasanam. Okay, so and then there's the Ritak Vena, Ritak Upasana, diverse in many forms. So that means he's worshipping one of the demigods or many of the demigods. So demigod worships, they're not directly approaching the Lord, but they're approaching through the recommendation of performing recommended sacrifices to the demigods. And the last one, Vishvato Mukam. This is the Vishvarupa Upasan, or the Vishvarupa form. So Vishvarupa means universal form. And I think I mentioned before, I'm walking home from, we've been out for a night, I know with my friend, and he looked up at the sky and he said, we're in the body of a big bloke. And, at the time, I couldn't really, I thought, what's he talking about? But actually he was right. That, the whole universe is, different planetary systems are different parts of Krishna's energy, like the sun and the moon are the eyes. They're giving illumination so you can see. And then, what's the other ones? I can't remember, but anyway, but, the different planet systems have different demigods who have different powers, and they're actually empowering different parts of this body. So everything comes from the universal form of the Lord, because the Lord's designated it. These demigods who are in charge of the different functions of this particular body, to say just of a few things, empowering this body to work in a certain way. So everything happens, Krishna performs an activity, then we can, like that. He's the Adhikata, he's the original doer. It's all very detailed, explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I think it's the 3rd canto. Just exactly how the different, parts of the different planet systems and the demigods produce the different activities of the body. So, any questions on that? No. Okay.
I have a question, but it's not particularly related to the last topic, so maybe at the end. Can I ask at the end, or?
Yeah. Well, actually, we're only a couple of minutes off the end anyway, so we'll stop there. And we're halfway through this, which I said we would do. We wouldn't complete it because it's a little bit more information we should understand in order to understand the overview of this particular chapter. So yeah, we'll start at 16 next week.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the next section is called Worshipping Krishna. It's going to explain these three things in order. In his, first of all, explain his universal form. Yeah. And then the other two will come later on. Yeah, so fire away. What do you want to ask my approach on the
Yes, Maharaj. I have 2 questions, but I don't want to be selfish, so maybe I will just start with first and see if others have some questions. So first one is the very often was asked also on book distribution or somewhere, like people when you explain people how Krishna or God controls the universe, and how it's explained how even not a blade of grass moves without his sanction. So sometimes people ask, so if God really controls everything, why there is so much suffering in the world? Why does he allow like small kids to suffer and things like that, you know?
Well, we covered this in the 5th chapter. It talks about karma yoga, and it started with verse 13 through to 16. I think or verse 14 to 16. It explained that, you know, the living entity thinks he's a doer. And so then, because he's thinking he's doing things and getting results, and when things don't go his way, he's saying that, you know, God's given me this freedom, it's his fault. He doesn't really understand God, actually. He just blames God when something goes wrong. He doesn't understand the science. And then the next chapter, it says that he should understand that he's controlled by the modes of nature who act in a certain way, and so are other people. And these modes of nature are actually organizing all the different activities and reactions that actually are taking place. So then he'll say, well, how are the modes of nature causing all this? Because even the modes of nature are working in the mind. They make us the person we are, or the mind that we think we are. And so the mind and intelligence will act in a certain way. So we completely, you know, stitched up, hook, line, and sinker, you know. So we're thinking that who's controlling these modes? Then the next verse says it's Krishna. So it's back to the, you know, Krishna's in control of the modes and it's his fault again. But then we have to understand in the next verse where it says that, you know, like it said in verse 14, that his energy is working, but he's actually detached. So this is connected here. He's detached. He's not actually taking any favoritism one way or another. He's giving us complete autonomy to act in the way we want. And so therefore he's just actually facilitating. You know, he doesn't want to facilitate certain things because he knows that we're going to suffer. But we're so, you know, desperate to do that he just has to let us do it because we have free will. And then we learn the hard way. We get a reaction. And because we're in ignorance, we don't even know why we're getting a reaction. And then he just carries on that we keep blaming God. So when we have knowledge, we can understand what's happening. And we can put a stop to the, you know, the fruitive activities. But it won't be that we're relieved from everything straight away, because like a fan carries on running, even though you pull the plug out, by momentum, it'll carry on for some time. So our materialistic, you know, conditioning will still act, even though we're a devotee, but it's actually becoming less and less powerful. The fan's starting to run down. But we may still be seeing through that paradigm to some degree, even though we may even philosophically understand it. When we put under pressure, we still, you know, if we're not completely fixed in that knowledge, we'll blame God. Especially if something really difficult situation we're in, you know. I've been serving for so long, and now this has happened. But then if we're actually really analytical, there's always a reason behind it. And if we're really philosophical, we realize that I know why this has happened. Or in due course of time, we realize why this has happened. And we'll always come to the conclusion is that it was for my best. I didn't realize it at the time. It's just like the story of the king. He had a really good friend with his prime minister. They used to do everything together. The prime minister was a theist. He used to worship God like anything. And the king was a bit of an atheist. And he kept questioning, why do you worship God? We can't see him, we can't touch him, we can't smell him, we can't, and he didn't spoil his faith. And then he said, look, whatever happens to you, it's God's mercy. So one day you know, they were hunting, and a snake came up in front of the horse of the king, and it threw the king off. The horse reared up and threw the king off, and the snake bit him. And so his prime minister says, cut your finger off straight away before the poison spreads. And so he cut his finger off. And then afterwards he says, yeah, it's definitely merciful, isn't it? You know, what did I do to deserve that? So, and then, you know, the prime minister started, you know, probing her, and he just threw him in jail. He'd had enough. And so the next hunting trip, you know, the king went out with his men, just a couple on, but all these dacoits saw him, and they overpowered him and they captured him. And they thought, wow, perfect specimen for a man sacrifice. They wanted to sacrifice a man to the, you know, goddess Kali. And so then they brought him before the chief dacoit, and the chief dacoit were in ecstasy. And then he eyed him over, and then he saw he's got a finger missing. He said, whoa. He says, he's got his finger, he's not complete, we can't offer him. And so they let him go. And he says, then he realized that actually the prime minister was right. And he went running back to the castle, and you know, he couldn't wait to tell him. And he was bubbling over with enthusiasm. And he says, you were right, you know. He says, proved it to me. He says, but he weren't very merciful to you, was he? He threw you in jail. He says, oh, he was. He said, if I'd have gone with you, I've got 10 feet. So
Brilliant.
we need to be thinking, and in hindsight, we'll actually understand. Okay, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Can I have one more question, Maharaj, please?
Okay.
If there is a little time. In this verse 9:12, in the purport, Prabhupada is saying in the beginning, there are many devotees who assume themselves to be in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, but at heart do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as the absolute truth. So I was just wondering, because one of the basic definition of devotee is that he is accepting Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how actually those people can be considered devotees?
Well, Prabhupada says there, who assume themselves to be devotees.
But he's saying there are many devotees. He's saying there are many devotees. It begins like that, you know. So that's why it struck my.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, a devotee means that there's different levels. The first level is that we surrender practically our bodily activities. We may do some service at the temple, although we may be an atheist, but we just do it for some reason. But that's good for us, and you know that. So everybody's coming to devotional service for different reasons, and you know, in the beginning, because we made such a change to his life, we think we're a devotee. You know what I mean? And we've come a long way, but we're not actually a devotee because we have no real affection for Krishna. You know, a real devotee, it means he's completely devoted, you know, devoted to the Supreme Lord. So they're not actually Krishna conscious. They're still self-centered, but at least they're actually doing the right thing. But they're assuming they're actually at a level that they're not at. That's what the and you know, there are some people who cheat. Mithrichar, they call them. They practice in devotional service because of some benefit they can get from it, like that. But you know, majority of devotees, they're not cheating. They come, you know, we have to analyze. We come to devotional service most of the time because we're suffering and we want some relief. So we are a devotee when we start to take shelter of Krishna's instructions, but we're not actually a devotee as such, if you know what I mean. But we're learning how to become a devotee. So you know, there's as many modes of nature there are. You know, there's thousands of that's as many thousand people who will approach Krishna, or many millions of different approaches. So this is just generalizing.
Yeah, clear. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. So now I've got to work out how to turn it off. Let's have a look.
Hare
Then-
Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.